Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher, author, filmmaker, and the founder of InPeak, a platform where entrepreneurs and business professionals come to network, learn together, and stay ahead of the curve in the fast-paced world of emerging technologies like blockchain, Web3, NFTs, AI, automation, and so much more. Our guest on today's podcast is Carly Reilly, the host of a brilliant podcast called Overpriced JPEGs. If you're a member of InPeak, you've probably heard me talk about Carly and her show. She's the reason why I discovered a number of top NFT projects, including Moonbirds. In addition to that, Carly also worked on Andrew Yang's campaign during his time as a presidential candidate. So we both have that background in politics in common too. Carly has a very deep understanding of all things IP and branding, which makes her show so rich with knowledge. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure you will too. Before we start, I also wanted to tell you about our sponsor for today's show. Metaverse Society, founded by Holger Manwiller, is the first project that builds a utility bridge between NFTs and the metaverse and a legacy industry. Every Metaverse Society NFT grants you in real life utility of up to 300 cans of free craft beer per year in perpetuity. You also get voting rights on business decisions and access to exclusive brewing classes and beer tastings. Metaverse Society is preparing to buy a real brewery from the NFT drop, where they deliver product innovations like high protein or smoked beers. They are also creating iconic beer shops in a digital twin of the Metaverse Society in the metaverse. The NFT revolution of the beer industry happens now, and you can be part of it. So, Carly, thank you for being here. Really looking forward to this conversation. And I've been looking forward to it because I have learned so much about NFTs from your show. And, I've discovered so many great projects, including Moonbird from your show. So I wouldn't be a Moonbird holder if it wasn't for you. So when you started the show, did you think about it did you know that it would go on to have such a big impact? Was that always your plan?
Well, first of all, Somi, thank you so much for having me on here. And, you've been incredibly generous to me. And I'll say publicly, like you gifted me a Moonbird oddity because I didn't make it on the Moonbirds list. And that was just so incredibly kind. So, so big fan of you and really appreciate this. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm ambitious, so I'm sure you can relate to this. If I start something, I totally want it to be big. I would say that I'm not near the end of where I want to go with the show and just broadly sort of the brand of Overpriced JPEGs, and we'll see how it evolves. But I absolutely want it to impact even more people than it has. And I'm so grateful anytime it's impacted anybody. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it. And that's been my feeling since the beginning.
Amazing. So it was really fascinating to me when I heard the first episode of your show, where you said that, I'm doing this to make everybody rich. This is not financial advice, but I want to make everybody rich. So what do you see the financial and the business upside of NFTs to be? What makes you so attracted to it from a business point of view? Because most people looking at it, they just think of it as some speculation. It's like risky, etc. When I look at it, I see the real business upside. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, and it's funny, the I want to make you rich thing. It's something I struggle with in general, making content, because those kinds of expressions can play well. People are very divided about them, but if you want maximum reach, saying things that make people divided is actually a pretty helpful strategy. And it's something that I grapple with because I mean that, right? I would love people to be financially independent and make money on the basis of learning through me. There's also a ton of speculation, so you can very easily lose a lot of money as well. So that's something that, can't be captured in just saying, I want to make everyone rich, but saying I want to make you rich, it does well for algorithms, so to speak, right? It's good content, but I struggle with that balance between that, and then like being nuanced and giving all of the caveats and saying it's, you know, it is more complicated than certainly like a, I don't know. I think then maybe people even give it credit for, because you see all these people who are making a ton of money online and you think, oh my gosh, it's so easy. And a lot of that is luck, right? Like the key here and what I want to do and the reason I'm have many years hopefully left of this podcast is like to dig deeper. And because the more you know, that's when you really get the advantage. And I'm a year into really being in this space, a little over a year into being in this space. And I still feel like I'm constantly understanding it at new levels and just getting better at sort of understanding it. Okay. So with that said, you were asking about the business case for NFTs. Well, I think, this is also part of my evolution. On the surface level, I think it's about understanding social signaling, right? And that's so much what the surface level case for NFTs is like, I want to signal that I'm a part of this community. Memes, the meme stock craze, the like memeable NFTs. We see this with Goblin Town right now. Like that all is part of a fun, how do I feel like I'm a part of a community that's a part of an inside joke? And how do I signal I'm a part of that community? So I think community and social signaling is strong business. It really is. And we're increasingly so. And as the world gets more digital, that's, only going to be more the case. That being said, I haven't fully taken the content there on the podcast, though a little bit with like my interview with Brendan Mulligan and Premint, but I'm so interested in everything that's being built on blockchain at a deeper level. And the more I really start to dig into this and understand this, just the more exciting it becomes to me. I had an episode that actually will be coming out tomorrow. His name is Jake Bruckman, and he's the founder and CEO of Coin Fund, which has been investing in the space for like 7 years. And we were talking about just the financialization, the way you're going to be able to collateralize assets, NFTs, there's so much that's happening, financial instruments and otherwise, that smart contracts are enabling, that I think is really interesting, and going a little bit deeper into understanding the businesses that are playing in that space. Because I think there's a lot of money to be made, and there's a really strong business case to be made for all of that. Like the people that are building these rails using smart contracts. So that fundamentally are NFTs, but maybe aren't what we think about when we think of NFTs, because they don't fall in that category of just like, a picture or something. So I think there's a lot of different interesting business cases to be made here.
Yeah, definitely. What do you say to people, or I wonder if you get this as much as I do, but what do you say to people that say basically like people are taking any business model and putting the word blockchain next to it, and they're, trying to kind of put a new spin on it and get people's money. Do you get that as well?
I mean, I think that's true. And I think it's like, you hear this comparison all the time. And so it's like almost lost its meaning, but I've been like reading about like the early days of Amazon as a company, and then kind of trying to read more about the early days of the .com bubble, because I was really too young then to be tracking it. But you hear that we're in this very analogous situation. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll read up on it a little bit to really understand it better. And there's clearly so many similarities. And you had the same thing then, right? You just added .com to anything and you could raise a bunch of money. Now, I think we're seeing that slow down in theory a little bit because of the bear market we're in. VCs are not as liquid as they were. Many of them have deployed their funds, whatever, right? Like, but I think that's why I think the slowdown, if you can weather it and you haven't overextended, and it is actually a good thing, because there has been too much money flowing around to like any business, it feels like, that says they're leveraging blockchain technology without the VCs or without people necessarily really understanding what that means. And so I think there has been loose capital for anything with blockchain. With that being said, you then have the camp of people who see that and somehow use it to write off the entire industry, which is absurd, right? Like there's so much interesting stuff that is being built. And so, to write off the industry as a whole, simply because there is too much money being thrown at it, or you think that a picture of an ape shouldn't be worth what it's worth. Like that's where people miscalculate. And that's the opportunity for folks like us who are willing to find that balance, to say, okay, I'm going to try and find the signal through the noise and put aside all of the sort of nonsense that's being built and try and find the things that are really interesting and doing something totally new.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of times when people say to me, oh, Web3 is just a marketing term. I'm like, yes, it is a marketing term, because there needs to be a way that we can explain, how it's different from the style of corporate state that we have had, in the likes of Facebook, etc. Let me ask you this question. Would you say that Facebook's meta or metaverse, or Meta's metaverse is, would you call it a Web3? Because I have difficulty calling it Web3, because for me, I feel like Web3 is supposed to be decentralized, like, tokenization, all that stuff. But would you call it a Web3?
Gosh, that's such an interesting question.
Or is it just an immersive version of what it already is?
It's almost like, it's almost like it's being built atop Web3. Like, I guess I think of Web3 as fundamentally like the blockchain as like rails for, call it internet commerce, for all these things. So to the extent that Meta is leveraging the blockchain, right? Like, I understand where it fits in this cohort of sort of Web3 businesses, but you're right. I mean, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out yet in terms of how interoperable it's going to be. I mean, they've put out their 52.5% fee thing, which feels crazy, but it also has implied that you'll be able to use some of their assets in other marketplaces and take it out of the Meta universe. So a lot has been said about the Meta piece, and like, are they really creative enough to actually usher in this new wave? And that fundamentally, like, Meta has never really innovated. They've benefited hugely from these incredible network effects, but they haven't been like fundamentally innovative. And will they be able to turn that around and like create the new metaverse? I think there's reasons to be skeptical of that. That being said, they've got all the network effects in the world and a crazy amount of money. So we'll see. I'm actually really interested in Instagram, which of course is part of the Meta family, but Adam Mosseri, I believe that's his last name, Mosseri, is the CEO of Instagram. And he recently did a TED Talk about NFTs. And he seems to actually get it. And he also seems fairly self-reflective. Like, he's aware of the perception of Instagram. He's aware of the perception of Meta. He's aware of, he worked on the Facebook feed at one point and seems to be aware of the perception of that. Like, but he really talked about individuals being able to own their audiences, and that being the shift that's underway because of Web3 and NFTs. And I think he even gave this example, if not, this was my sort of extrapolation of what he was saying, but like, Instagram is rolling out an NFT integration, and Twitter's already done an NFT integration, and TikTok did NFTs through IMX. All these platforms are coming on board in their own way, and will probably only increasingly do so. And he was like, all right, imagine, again, I think this was from Adam. He was saying like, you release your NFT, you're a creator, and then everyone, your Instagram following gets access to special content in some way because they own your NFT. But now if they own your NFT, it can also mean something for them on Twitter, right? And as soon as they log into Twitter, because they hold that NFT in a non-custodial wallet, maybe a MetaMask or whatever, but they log into Twitter and they integrate that NFT with it, they can also get your special content right there on Twitter. So if the Instagram platform disappeared, you actually still have access to an audience. You can put a new API up, or you can put a new sort of interface up that connects the NFTs and still reach your audience. So you're, as a creator, able to own that audience in a way that you really can't right now, because they really belong more to the platform. So this is coming from the head of Instagram recognizing this as the next phase in this, and describing what I think he hopes to be Instagram's role in that. And I have to say, it made me more bullish, because while I hope we end up with like decentralized social media platforms, fully, and Lens protocol and all these protocols that are trying to do that, I hope they succeed. In the intermediary term, like, just giving creators a little bit more leverage and a little bit more power over these platforms is an awesome place to be. And to hear the head of Instagram talking about that. Anyway, that was long-winded, but I think I'm excited to see where that plays out. And again, excited to see that Adam at Instagram seems to understand.
So I made a note to watch that TED Talk, actually. But so like, for example, I've got a pretty big following on LinkedIn, but I don't have the same kind of following on Instagram or Twitter. And I was early, as a content creator on LinkedIn, got chosen as a LinkedIn Top Voice 3 years in a row. So that's why I get so many speaking opportunities, lots of things that come to me from LinkedIn, but I can't translate that into other places, right? And it would be absolutely game changing if these platforms have some form of a wallet integration that that allows you to say, like, because as long as you are identified as the holder of that wallet and that's associated with your profile, that like whatever you post on Twitter, maybe that your followers on Instagram see it, or on LinkedIn see it. And I think this is like something that it's like absolutely important for these big platforms to think about, if they want to stay relevant in any way, because this is one of the ways that, that this is something that everybody wants, because you have to spend so much time and effort to build new audiences on every new platform, right? But one of the things that we obviously know about these big platforms is that they're going to be quite slow to move because of the sheer number of people that are involved. So with that said, I don't know if you watched, there's a episode of Bankless where they interviewed the guys from Polygon.
Yeah.
Did you see the one where they talk about,
about Instagram?
Yeah.
I started that episode. I was actually at Permissionless. I was in Palm Beach, Florida at the Bankless's Permissionless conference, like in an Uber listening to that episode, and then had to get out and check into my hotel and all these things. And I didn't end up coming back to it. So I haven't listened to the whole thing, admittedly, but I know the episode you're talking about. I probably heard the first 10 minutes or so.
But it was just fascinating because what they were saying was that actually their vision is incredible. And like they've got this, fascinating, ideas of how they want to integrate Web3. And they were like, we are not ready for what they are asking for. That they're like so ahead of the game with their vision, and we are not quite ready for what.
We can't deliver what they need because that's incredible.
Yeah. So it's just that I really hope to get Mark Zuckerberg on my podcast at some point. But it's like, I'm sure everybody wants to, right at this point, because everybody wants to know what they are going to be doing with. But it's just that having that skepticism of Mark Zuckerberg himself, and the whole Facebook, the shareholders, the structure. It's pretty hard to imagine. One of the things that I've always said is like they owe us a lot of airdrops because we literally
yeah, amen. Oh my gosh, that's so true. No, I totally understand that. I think the ethos of Facebook has very clearly seemed to be like make money and do well by us over any sort of sacrifice or compromise that would be better for the collective. And those of us in Web3 at this stage are, so much of the ethos of Web3 is about the collective and about the community and about the group and how can we be giving back. And so those feel very fundamentally at odds. So I totally agree. It'll be interesting to see how they approach Web3. Again, they're savvy enough to know how to use the right buzzwords. And we'll have to see if that gets matched with action.
Because one of the things that Ryan always says from Bankless is that when you adopt the crypto protocol, so you also adopt the crypto ethos, it remains to be seen if that's the case, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that I'm really interested in your background is your political background, and the work that you did with Andrew Yang. And as I was talking about Facebook, or Meta owing us a lot of airdrops, it made me think about the whole concept of universal basic
data dividend,
and I think that, people could essentially make their universal basic income through engaging in these communities and like building these communities. But the truth is that quite a lot of that work is already done, because it's all of the interactions that we have had, people like me and you, we've had on these platforms that has enabled their machine learning algorithms to become more and more sophisticated, right? So they do need, I always see us as almost like dinosaurs, right? Like we are like the fossil, like, and the fossils are like turning into oil and fueling these big organizations by training their machine learning algorithms. So let's talk a little bit about your background in politics. Are you still are you still interested in it? Are you still involved in it? And how did you end up with NFTs from there?
Yeah, not super involved in politics anymore because it was like, it was hard. I left after Andrew's presidential campaign. And I will say he was so early on so many concepts that we really love in Web3, right? He talked about the tech check, right? And basically let's tax these big tech companies through a value-added tax was his plan anyway. Won't get into that, but, and it was call it a tech check, right? Like you think of it, if you have a hard time wrapping your head around getting money for quote unquote nothing, which is what people would say, it's like, great, consider it your payment for all of your data that they're using to become wildly profitable. Like he was very early in talking about all of that. So I was really drawn to Andrew's presidential campaign because of those kinds of ideas, which I think shows my wiring and then makes it not a hard leap to understand why I was so drawn to Web3. I think I felt like he had such a fresh perspective. I heard him on a podcast actually in the summer of 2018. I was a UBI fan already and really just felt like, how can we nationalize this conversation around universal basic income and the way he's talking about it in particular, which I just felt like was such a fresh perspective to bring to politics. What I learned then being in politics for 2 years at sort of that level and with that particular candidate, which was, he was not the normal establishment candidate by any means. So people who worked for Elizabeth Warren, for example, probably have a different perspective on what politics means. But certainly it's true that you're very beholden to media narratives. And I found that really, really frustrating. This, something could be happening in our universe and then the media would cover it in a certain way. And it felt like, God, that's not the reality of the situation necessarily at all, but that's now the perception of the public because they're only seeing it through this lens of how the media is filtering it. So I left Andrew's campaign after the presidential campaign. I left, I went and worked at a VC fund for a little while, and he then ran for mayor of New York, where that was really true because he was the front runner here in New York. And the press coverage I found was like appallingly bad and just like really missed the mark on a number of things. And in cases outright lied, I got lied about, like whatever. It was really kind of traumatizing in certain ways. And so anyway, that was part of the reason I wanted to leave politics. And I think because I felt so beholden to these narratives and I hated that. And I also, it's so toxic. I mean, and I don't know, my mental health is a lot better since getting into Web3, to be honest. When my Twitter shifted from political Twitter, dominated by political talk to Web3 Twitter, I was like, God, I feel so much better. Now, with that said, I understand there's a lot of privilege in that. And there's a lot of politics are so important. And I'm not trying to dismiss that, but I think the system is so broken now. It's actually really, really hard to make a difference. And I'm still a fan of Andrew. He's talking about ranked choice voting and open primaries as a way to allow for third parties in this country to actually have legitimate third parties, because he feels like the duopoly and the two-party system is really broken here. And I think I really agree with that. I think as long as the system functions the way it does, like the fact that we can't do anything after these mass shootings is just, and it's so toxic and it feels so bad. And I don't want to just spend my life crying and angry. So anyhow, again, long-winded answer, I think, to what your question was, so that was my journey in politics. Again, really grateful for it and learned so much. And then also really wanted to leave because I felt frustrated by it in so many ways. And then this transition to Web3, really, I was interested in crypto back in 2016, 2017, right out of college. I was at a hedge fund. Thought Ethereum was interesting, but so untested. So I was like, okay, well, whatever, theoretically interesting. And then I worked as Andrew's finance director. So I was working with a lot of our big donors, and there was a decent number of them who were into crypto. So they were sort of keeping my pulse. I was sort of keeping the pulse on crypto a little bit through that. And then I actually was helping to co-host Andrew's podcast called Yang Speaks, coming off of during when he was running for mayor, actually, and I was at the VC fund. And I interviewed Ryan Sean Adams from Bankless. And I was already starting to kind of to dive deeper into crypto at that time. But then, he came on and it really clicked for me, oh my gosh, all of these things that they said Ethereum was going to do back in 2016, 2017, when I was loosely tracking it, they're starting to do that now. So I was first tracking what was happening in DeFi and being like, wow, they're really delivering on this thing that was just sort of an abstract dream a few years ago that I thought was interesting. And then I discovered NFTs and then really just went down the rabbit hole, quit my job, was like, I want to be in Web3. And for me, I do think it's a wiring thing to some extent. Again, the things that I was drawn to in Andrew's campaign, I see how they're similar. I see how there's crossover with them in Web3. So I think I've always just been interested in the concepts that we're seeing proliferate in Web3 and in technology. So
no, I totally relate to what you're talking about. I studied politics. I studied political philosophy and philosophy of science and technology. I've got 2 masters in that. And I was studying in St. Andrews University in Scotland, where there are a lot of American educators and also a lot of American PhD students, etc. So I got invited to the US State Department when I was studying there. They paid for my trip for 3 weeks. This was in 2006. I was like, I had just come to the UK, and I was doing my master's there. And they paid for the whole trip. They were so nice to me. I went there. I talked to senators, Congress people, Chicago Tribune, lots of different think tanks, American Enterprise Institute, Brookings Institute, all these places. When I came back, I was like, okay, I don't want to be in politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's just so toxic, and that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to stick to the political philosophy. And then I went into media, I learned marketing, and then eventually I found my way into Web3. But it's like so toxic. It's so toxic that I don't know how they get anything done.
Yes. Well, if you're somebody with who's I mean, this sounds maybe condescending then to people in politics, but like, if you want to solve things, which you're a builder, you want like progress is so slow in politics. And at this point, it feels like almost hopeless to me, again, without really fundamentally changing our system. And I think Andrew's on the right track with breaking up the duopoly. So like, I was like, I need to feel progress on a different scale than I'm feeling in politics, and in a different way where you can just like heads down, go and do something. You can't heads down things in politics because it's all about the politics of it. It's about the networking and the schmoozing and the kind of manipulation. And it's just a very different animal. And so Web3 is lovely because it moves at a pace that's breakneck.
Yeah, definitely. So this last thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So women in NFTs, it's something that I think it's no secret to anybody that none of the female-led projects are really, getting what they deserve in terms of the level of, adoption, floor price, all that stuff. And I know that in general, women often don't like to talk about price. They see it not as a good thing, but I do think that we need to be comfortable talking about money. One of the things that when I started what is now InPeak, which is, started out as FemPeak, the goal was to get women, like lift them up and raise their socioeconomic status. Now we are expanding to a wider community because it was very limiting. And I think that the challenges that I faced, I think that's the challenge that a lot of women-led projects are facing. So before I started the platform, I ran a think tank for women in business and technology to understand why women were being left behind and what were the reasons why women got started. They didn't make it to the top tier, even in areas that are typically known as female domains, like dancing and cooking or sewing. Even in those areas, the highest paid ballet dancers are male. Did you know that? Actually,
no.
Yeah, so the highest paid ballet dancers are male. The highest paid chefs are male. The highest paid clothing designers, fashion designers are male. Even though these are things that are supposedly female domain, right? So we did a lot of research to find out why that was, and it comes down to 6 reasons. And that is a shortfall in confidence, tech skills, financial literacy, entrepreneurship skills, and women's health issues, and family and relationship. So every time we look at why women are not making it to the top tier, it's a combination of these 6 things. So one of the things that we are doing with our platform, which is something that no other female-led project has done, is we have a female PFP coming out, like a collection of 10,000 female PFPs. And then that collection is going to be matched with a collection of 10,000 male PFPs. And the idea is that the first one is called FemPeakers. The second one is called allies. And the idea is to build allyship. So the second one is going to be 9,000 men, and about 1,000 or 10% of them are going to be like LGBTQ. So that not every woman has a male partner. So the idea is to build this concept of allyship, and really talk about, this will be like the first female-led project that is followed by a male PFP. And then the third one that will be the follow-up to that is going to be like, you know how when you go to pre-mint and you need to enter your wallet, and then they will look at whether you have the certain NFTs so that you qualify for for something else. But this is one of the things I want to talk about with Brendan from Premint, to say if we can build this feature so that it's not like one person with one wallet with two NFTs, but like two wallets, right? So that so you have like two people that create an allyship between themselves, right? And or friendship, so that if between the two of you, if you have, each of you has got one of those, one of you has got the fem pickers, one of you has got the allies, then you both get, the third one. Whereas in all other cases, like, you're on your own. And the reason why I came up with this idea was because I spoke to a lot of people who, for example, men who have got a world of women, but I asked them, does your wife have one? And they say no. So this way, I think if we can encourage this concept of building allyship, so first of all, I wanted to ask you several questions in a row. One is, what do you think of those 6 reasons? Do they make sense to you? The second thing is, what do you think of this idea? Does this make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Wow. So much there. I think those 6 reasons absolutely make sense to me. It's funny. I tweeted recently something about this a little bit, and I feel mixed when talking about the space and getting more women in it. I sometimes worry, like I worry sometimes when we talk about women doing as well in NFTs, or, like, because the floor price is suppressed or this or that it like turns more women off from joining, where it can have that counterproductive effect, where I also want to say, like, I've found a lot of support and like amazing people in this space as a woman, and like have felt really happy here. And so I also want that narrative to get to come join. Like, you're doing a great job of that. So I always want to add that when we're also talking about, the downsides. But I did tweet recently, because I'm a big fan of the All In podcast. I don't know if you listen to that. And it's Chamath Palihapitiya. It's called All In. There's a couple of them. If you Google like All In podcast, this is definitely the biggest one, but I don't think it always pops up first on like Apple Podcasts. It's with Chamath Palihapitiya and Jason Calacanis and David Sachs and Jason Friedman. And they're like 4 VCs. They're very bro-y, right? Like I have friends who listen to them and they're like, oh, they're so bro-y. And I'm like, it's true, but they're super smart and they've really succeeded. And I think their takes on the market are really interesting. Anyway, they're also very friendly with Elon Musk. They had Elon on the podcast recently. And there was this moment in this episode that was just so striking to me, because they were talking about why birth rates are down and why people are having like fewer kids. And they seemed to like conclude it was because people like didn't want to bring kids into the world, and they were like, oh, there's this narrative that the world is so bad. And so like people aren't wanting to bring the kids into the world. And I was like, Elon Musk has like 7 kids. I'm like, Elon, would you have had 7 kids if you had to be the one who like gestated them and birthed them and then breastfeeded them? Like, of course you wouldn't. You're not running your car company and your rocket company and birthing 7 children. Like, that's part of what's going on here. And to like have totally missed that point, I was like, oh my God, like to just, and because it's not even about, hopefully you find a partner, and it's like, I don't, it shouldn't be on you to have to, do all of the child rearing, but forget just that, like just the process of pregnancy is like, depending on who you are, I think someone would have a very easy pregnancy, but I'm anticipating like a pregnancy where like I'm hormonal and I'm all over the place. And like, it does, cut into my productivity. And so I'm factoring that in when I think about what I want out of my career and how pregnancy plays into that. And it's incredible to me, like how much men just like that didn't occur to these men who all have many kids that they themselves did not have to gestate. So anyhow, there's for whatever that's worth, that was something that I found really striking recently. This idea sounds awesome. I think, I love the idea of sort of partnering folks up and sort of forcing the hand a little bit. It sounds like to say like, to on the male side, for example, like you have to have this partner female, if you're going to thrive and do well, then so is she. And, that spirit of lifting each other up. I mean, you said that to me at the beginning, you gifted me an oddities, and it so clearly comes from a place of like, hey, men have these networks, like men support each other. And we as women need to make sure we're doing the same. Like, you were saying Kevin Rose gifted Ryan and David Moonbirds. All right, fine. Well, I'm going to give you an oddity. And I love that so much. And, I was at a conference recently, and I was there alone, which, at this point I have a podcast, I know people, I have group texts in the space. Like I can find people to hang out with at these conferences, but there have been times where I've been at conferences, even I feel like, or events, even pre-Web3 stuff, where I was alone and like my friends weren't super into it or whatever. And I didn't have really a name yet. So I was just sort of traversing the thing like by myself, and that's extra exhausting. And so I was at this conference recently, and I was in an elevator, and I was riding up to my hotel room, and there were these two guys there, and they're clearly friends, like not just in the Web3 world, like they clearly knew each other from the past. And they're like at this conference together, like taking it on together. And I was like, God, that is so part of this whole thing, is like just not having the networks, not having the friends to text, not being able to be like, not having a group around you that's like your buddies who are like also keeping up in the space with you. Like you're kind of doing it a little bit on your own if you don't have those friends with you, which women are just less likely to have. And so I love that. I think, creating those network effects for folks is an awesome thing. And I feel like that's like at the spirit of what you're at the core of what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. When I started this thing, it was like, men have built their networks over, centuries and millennia. They went together hunting, and they had to organize themselves to go out and hunt and all that stuff. Whereas women, there is a sisterhood too, but it's not to the same degree of, ultimately the woman is left with the child, and like all of the things they need to focus on that child. So that's something that, and like, making sure that the house is in shape, etc., for the man to return. Right. So I think that, we need to change that. And I think the way that we can change it through technology, we can speed up the change. We can speed up by almost engineering it. So what I'm thinking about with these NFTs is pretty much engineering social change.
Yeah, that's so cool.
What I'm thinking about, right? And it's like, this is like a small scale test of 20,000 people, etc. But as over time, I want to popularize this concept of allyship, and to really make it so that people actually actively think about it. This is the true meaning of diversity, if you wanted to think of it. It's so much more practical in a way than, let's say, your company sponsors some events that that we bring in some women to sit on the panel, and we call it like a diversity panel. You know what I mean? Like that's how I see it. So because one of the things that my understanding of tokenization is that tokens are used or can be used to align incentives between the different parties. And this is a great example. How can we use these tokens, these non-fungible tokens, to align incentives between men and women and people of diverse backgrounds to support each other and lift each other?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think you're totally right. Blockchain is great for human coordination and like incentive alignment going right. Whereas the Web2 world and the social media world and those companies, that's what went wrong, right? The incentives were aligned improperly between the people and the companies themselves. And I think there's so much about Web3 that's looking to rectify that. And I think this is an amazing example of that.
Amazing. So, Carly, what's the future for you? Where can people find you, and what's your plans? So right now you are on, I know that you are on Bankless, but you also have your own YouTube channel as well. So I've subscribed to that too.
So, okay, you can follow me on Twitter at Carly P. Reilly or on Instagram. It's funny, we talked about these platforms earlier, and like, Web3 has changed my thinking in so many ways. And one of those ways is, as I've thought about where do I want to really spend my energy on growth, I've been so hesitant about social media as that channel because I don't own that audience. And so starting a newsletter, for example, where I own that email list and I can grow an email list that I really have control over, has a lot more appeal to me than maybe growing my social media presence. With that being said, go follow me. So Carly P. Reilly, CarlyPreilly. That's my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle, and like kind of all the places. In terms of what's next, it's such a fraught question because I'm thinking a lot about this. So I started the podcast in November of last year. I've been in that time also working as chief of staff at a blockchain company called BlockBlock. BlockBlock's in a little bit of a transition phase right now, and as am I. And so I'm really trying to figure out what does my future look like. I think I probably can't announce anything just yet. I've had a couple other opportunities arise. I probably will have some other content coming out through sort of other avenues. Yes, I've got the Overpriced JPEGs YouTube channel, which we spun off from the Bankless YouTube channel because for a variety of reasons, we just kind of need our own place there, but we haven't really doubled down on promoting it. Anyhow, please go subscribe. I'm trying to figure out my balance right now between going full-time and really doubling down on overpriced JPEGs and that ecosystem, which there's so many ways we can do more there, grow there. It's been sort of an experiment that's gone really well. And now, doubling down with also wanting to keep my hand in the builder space and, wanting to still be working in not a corporate environment by any means, but of my own or working with a team, kind of feeling not ready to just full-time be content. And I thought that's maybe what I had wanted. And now that I'm sort of here on the precipice of that, I think I feel like there's so much I learned by being in it and building in the space. I'm actually really in this crossroads right now where I'm trying to figure out exactly what it's all going to look like in terms of the balance for me in my life and building while also doing the content thing. And then, but really wanting to, invest even more in the Overpriced JPEGs ecosystem for sure.
Mm-hmm, perfect. So where can we subscribe to your newsletter? Because I totally agree with you. When I started building the platform, I focus on newsletter, mailing lists. So we have got about 60,000 people in our newsletter and not as many following on social media because I went directly because I had a big following on LinkedIn. So I did cold outreach and I was like, hey guys, I'm building this thing, are you interested in learning more? But most of our audience are not yet ready for Web3. So when we started reaching out to them, it was like, this building this ecosystem about, emerging technologies and getting more women into it, but a lot of them are not yet ready for Web3, but they're starting to learn more. So where can we become, part of your newsletter, for example?
I don't have it yet.
Oh,
this is all sort of,
okay.
it's all still sort of this crossroads moment I'm describing. And I had some traveling this year that was already lined up. And so I wanted to incorporate that into the podcast. So I went to Puerto Rico and I ended up filming a little series, almost a little mini doc about the NFT scene in Puerto Rico and the Web3 scene in Puerto Rico, because it's really thriving, but the coverage of it has been like exclusively about the tax haven, and you have all these crypto bros moving to Puerto Rico because it's a tax haven, and it felt like, okay, that's an important story to tell, and that's true, that's happening, but by doing that, you're actually overlooking all of these local Puerto Ricans of all sorts of diverse backgrounds who are in this space doing really cool things. So I wanted to go and highlight sort of the Puerto Ricans who are there, who have been doing all this amazing work. So all of that coming out soon. And then another one, I went to the Amazon and there's an amazing project called Nemis building really in the Amazon. It's this Brazilian American family that's leading it. So I went to the Amazon with them to show what they're doing. So I have those two coming out that have been like, I have to get those done and like shipped before I can fully turn to kind of the next piece. So that those will go live on the Bankless YouTube channel, as well as my own YouTube channel, the Overpriced JPEGs YouTube channel. So definitely be subscribed to both Bankless and Overpriced JPEGs YouTube in order to, to get the track update. What's happening there. And then, with those sort of shipped and sort of figuring out what I'm doing with the company I'm at and whatever, at some point here, probably in the next, call it month to 2 months, I'll likely launch a newsletter. I haven't said that to Bankless yet, so I hope they don't like hear this and are like, what? We haven't no, so I've got people to talk to about all these things, but
yeah, that's cool. So once that's ready, let us know and I will share it with our, give me the link. I will share it with our, of course. Like I said, the allyship, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Carly, this has been a great conversation. I look forward to having you again later on when you're ready, when you're, you built all these new things and come back and tell us all the news that you will have by then.
Amazing. Somi, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Carly Reilly. Be sure to follow her on Twitter at Carly P. Reilly and check out her fantastic podcast, Overpriced JPEGs. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to it on Apple, Spotify, or any other one of your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and write a review. The full interviews are also available on my YouTube channel, The Somi Arian Show.